Beloved, welcome into a moment that feels ordinary on the surface, yet hums with something ancient beneath it, as though unseen hands have quietly guided your steps here. In this story, the air itself seems aware of you, listening as you arrive, carrying a history written not only in memory, but in muscle and breath. You have lived as though the world were a narrow bridge swaying in the wind, every step measured, every pause guarded, your shoulders trained to rise before danger even appeared. In the unseen realm of this tale, there was a time when your name was spoken in rooms you could not see, when your life was weighed not by what you achieved, but by what you endured. Night after night, you lay awake, while shadows pressed against the edges of your thoughts, rehearsing losses that had not yet happened, convincing yourself that peace was only a brief visitor who never stayed long. Survival became your language. Tension became your second skin. And yet, even in those years when joy felt like a foreign country and rest felt undeserved, something gentle followed you, never rushing, never forcing, simply remaining. In the mystical fabric of this story, heaven was not watching you struggle with folded arms, it was leaning in, attentive, protective, refusing to let the weight fully crush you. The battle that defined your inner world raged quietly, without banners or witnesses, but it was real all the same. Each morning you rose again, not because you felt strong, but because something within you refused to disappear. You mistook that persistence for your own effort, not realizing that an unseen strength was threading your days together, sealing cracks before they split you apart. There were moments when you nearly believed the struggle had named you forever, that you were destined to remain, in a constant state of readiness, braced for impact. But in this story, something shifted long before you noticed. Somewhere beyond sight, a verdict was spoken without drama or thunder. The conflict that stalked you, shaped you, drained you, reached its end not with noise, but with authority. Victory arrived quietly, like dawn entering a dark room without asking permission. Your body still remembered the war, flinching at echoes, holding tension as if danger were always one breath away. Your mind still replayed scenes of endurance, unsure how to exist without the familiar weight of vigilance. Yet even as the world around you continued with its noise and demands, something inside softened. Fear no longer attached the way it once did. Old temptations lost their sharpness. Peace began to settle, tentative at first, like a guest unsure whether it was truly welcome. You didn't recognize it immediately, because when rest finally comes after years of survival, it can feel unsettling, almost suspicious. But heaven does not wait for human recognition to act. In this fictional yet sacred unfolding, the declaration had already been made. The fire and the water were behind you, even if your senses had not yet caught up to the truth. The story insists on this. You are not spared because you were lucky, and you are not preserved because you were invisible. You were held because the story was not finished, and the chapter you now stand within carries a different tone, one not driven by urgency, but by settled ground beneath your feet. As the narrative deepens, it reveals another layer you cannot ignore, a quieter transformation that asks you to see yourself differently than you ever have before. In this world of symbols and whispers, armor is no longer a requirement, though you still feel its weight on your shoulders out of habit. You learned to wear it so long ago that removing it feels like exposure, even though the battlefield has gone silent. The story does not rush you. It understands that when a war ends, the body and soul need time to believe it. You learn to scan faces, to read rooms, to anticipate harm before it formed. And that posture became familiar, almost comforting in its predictability. But now, the path ahead does not demand vigilance in the same way. You are not being asked to prove resilience again. You are being invited to live as someone who already crossed the line that was meant to stop them. In the unseen realm of this tale, recognition has already occurred. Heaven noticed that you stayed when leaving would have been easier, that you carried truth when silence would have been safer, that you continued without applause, affirmation, or assurance. This recognition is not loud. It does not announce itself with spectacle. It simply aligns timing with truth, allowing the outer world to eventually catch up with what has already been settled beyond it. The challenges of life do not vanish in this chapter, but the specific war that hunted your sense of self, that fed on your exhaustion and confusion, no longer has permission to follow you. It has lost its authority, and though its echoes still try to speak, they are remnants, not commands. In this mystical story, rest is not portrayed as collapse or retreat. It is depicted as a new posture of being. A full exhale replaces shallow breaths. Prayer shifts from desperation to trust. Love moves from guarded transactions to grounded presence. Worth no longer needs to be earned through endurance. It stands quietly, self-evident. You begin to sense that peace is not fragile here. It is rooted, steady, capable of holding weight without breaking. When old panic rises, the story gently reminds you that the record has been sealed, the verdict spoken, the outcome secured. The restlessness that once drove you belongs to a chapter already written and closed. What belongs to you now is something unfamiliar yet deeply true, a grounded freedom, a calm that does not need to announce itself, a strength that no longer strains to prove its existence. In this unfolding narrative, rest is revealed not as weakness, but as the truest sign that the conflict has ended. The tension your body carried for so long is acknowledged with compassion, not judgment, because it was learned in survival. But now the story leans forward, inviting you to remain here, in this space where vigilance slowly loosens its grip, where the soul learns a new language, and where the quiet certainty of victory begins to rewrite everything you thought you were. It became normal in a way that was almost invisible, like a low hum you stop noticing because it has always been there. Even now, with the fiercest battles behind you, your mind still lifts its head at the smallest sound, scanning the horizon as if danger might rise again at any second. In this second movement of the story, that habit is not judged or condemned, it is understood. It was learned over years when staying alert meant staying alive, when relaxing even for a moment felt like inviting disaster. The inner watchman never slept because the cost of sleep once felt too high. And yet, in the quiet realm where this story unfolds, a different voice has begun to speak, not loudly, not with command, but with steady patience. It says you do not have to live like that anymore. It says the ground beneath you is not shifting. It says you are safe enough now to let your shoulders drop without consequence. Rest, in this world, is not depicted as absence or emptiness. It is movement without panic, breathing without calculation, living without the constant expectation of collapse. Rest means releasing the weight you already carried beyond the finish line, the burden that no longer belongs to the present moment but still clings out of habit. In the imagery of this tale, rest is trust that has learned to walk. Think of the runner who crosses the line after miles of strain, lungs burning, muscles trembling. No one questions whether they deserve to stop. No one mistakes their stillness for failure. The proof of effort is etched into their body, into their posture, into the road already traveled. That is how the unseen realm ease you now. You ran distances few ever witness, let alone understand. You endured storms designed to empty you entirely, winds that howled with the promise of erasure. And yet, here you stand, breathing, aware, present. Your continued existence is not accidental decoration in this story, it is evidence. That is why rest is no longer a luxury you postpone until everything feels perfect. It is a necessity written into the next chapter. It is the preparation for what comes after survival. The shift being offered to you now is subtle but profound. You are not perpetually on the edge of disaster. You are not one misstep away from losing everything you've built. You are not living under a sentence of endless exhaustion handed down by fate. The fight tried to convince you that survival itself had to be your identity, that vigilance was your worth, that tension was your proof of responsibility. But heaven, in this fictional yet sacred narrative, is teaching you a new language. Rest is no longer something you earn later. It is something you inherit now. When you begin to live from this place, the texture of life changes in ways that feel almost unreal at first. The urgency that once drove you begins to loosen its grip. You notice that you no longer need to rush to justify your existence. Opportunities arrive without being hunted. Doors open without you having to bruise your shoulders forcing them. The voices that once demanded explanations lose their power because you are no longer negotiating your worth with anyone. Rest silences desperation, and desperation was the final chain still rattling at your ankles, pretending it had authority. When that chain falls away, your spirit settles into itself, not collapsing but aligning. Rest does not turn you careless or indifferent in this story. It does not erase responsibility or dull your awareness. Instead, it removes fear from the driver's seat. Decisions are no longer made from panic or scarcity. You stop believing that everything depends on you pushing harder, stretching thinner, sacrificing yourself indefinitely. You begin, slowly, and sometimes clumsily, to let the weight return to the hands that were meant to carry it all along. This is not symbolic flourish here. It is a covenant woven into the narrative. The idea that you were never designed to hold every burden alone is treated as an unbreakable law of this world. Just as a soldier is not meant to live forever on the battlefield, just as a farmer does not plow endlessly without expectation of harvest, you were never meant to exist in constant warfare. You are meant to move in rhythms that include effort and receiving, vigilance and ease. This season, unnamed but unmistakable, leans toward receiving. And if you listen closely, you can already feel the invitations scattered through your days. Quiet moments that do not feel like emptiness, but like fullness without noise. Peace that arrives without explanation and refuses to leave when questioned. Calm that settles not because circumstances are perfect, but because something deeper has stabilized. It is understandable, the story acknowledges, if this feels unfamiliar, even unsettling. When survival has been your primary language, joy can feel suspicious, silence can feel dangerous, love can feel like a setup for loss. That unease is not a sign that rest is wrong. It is a sign that your body and mind are learning a new reality. In this realm, heaven has already declared the outcome. The battle is over, even if your nervous system still flinches at echoes. So the story asks you to be gentle with yourself, to practice resting with the same devotion you once practiced fighting, to practice receiving with the same endurance you once gave to persevering. Over time, you begin to see that rest does not weaken you. It sharpens perception dulled by exhaustion. It deepens love once thinned by constant output. It allows creation without the endless cycle of repair. This is why the insistence on rest feels so strong now. It is not a temporary pause. It is sustainability written into your future. The blessing offered here was never meant to cost you your well-being. Love was never meant to feel like another battlefield. In this unfolding story, rest is holy ground. It is restoration in motion. It is the quiet assurance that what you have done was enough, that what you have survived matters, and that you are no longer required to bleed to prove devotion. You are invited to breathe without guilt, to still your body without fear, to let joy exist without bracing for loss. The rhythm you are aligning with now does not demand constant effort. It asks for trust. And trust, at its deepest level in this narrative, looks like rest that does not apologize for itself. Rest that does not rush to justify its presence. Rest that simply exists as evidence that the war no longer defines the world you are living in. As the third movement of the story unfolds, something subtle but unmistakable begins to take shape around you, like light slowly filling a room at dawn. It is not sudden revelation or dramatic transformation. It is continuity made gentle, strength made quiet, identity settling into its true form. In this part of the journey, rest is no longer something you are practicing consciously. It has begun to weave itself into you. You notice it in the way your breath deepens without effort, in how your thoughts no longer spiral toward catastrophe at the first sign of uncertainty. The inner watchman who once stood guard through every hour of the night has not vanished. but he has learned to sit down, to trust the silence instead of interrogating it. In this fictional and mystical realm, time behaves differently now. It does not chase you. Moments stretch without tension, and you begin to realize that your worth was never tied to urgency. The world still turns, demands still arise, but they no longer feel like threats to your existence. They are simply parts of life, no longer weighted with the fear that everything rests on your shoulders alone. You begin to recognize that what once felt like strength was often just endurance under pressure, while what you are learning now is strength anchored in peace. The story shows you that your survival was never the final goal. It was the passage. You were carried through the fire, not so you could remain scorched forever, but so you could emerge knowing the flames no longer owned you. In this chapter, you start to see your past not as a collection of wounds, but as a map of where grace quietly intervened, again and again. Every moment you thought you were holding yourself together alone is revealed as a moment you were being held without realizing it. This realization does not erase the pain of what you endured, but it transforms its meaning. The scars no longer speak of loss, they speak of continuity. They say you were not abandoned in the hardest seasons. They say something stayed with you when everything else fell away. As the narrative deepens, you begin to notice how rest changes the way you move through the world. Your presence becomes steadier, less reactive. You listen more fully, because you are no longer planning your escape. You speak with clarity, because fear is no longer editing your words. People around you sense this shift, even if they cannot name it. There is a groundedness about you that did not exist before, a calm that does not demand attention yet quietly commands respect. You are no longer driven by the need to be seen or validated, because something inside you has already settled the question of your worth. In the mystical logic of this story, rest becomes a form of authority. It signals that you are no longer governed by chaos. You begin to understand that peace is not passive, it is an active alignment with truth. The more you live from this place, the more you realize how much of your former striving was fueled by the fear of being forgotten, overlooked, or erased. Now, fear loosens its grip. You no longer chase belonging, you carry it. You no longer perform strength, you embody it. And with this embodiment comes discernment. You see more clearly which paths are yours to walk, and which were only survival routes you no longer need. You learn that saying no does not diminish you, and that waiting does not mean failure. The rhythm of your life begins to resemble something sacred, balanced between action and stillness, giving and receiving. You are no longer allergic to quiet. You no longer mistrust joy. When happiness arrives, you allow it to stay without interrogating how long it will last. This is not naivety. It is confidence rooted in experience. You have seen how much you can survive. Now you are learning how much you are allowed to enjoy. In the final stretch of the story, a deeper truth rises to the surface, one that reframes everything that came before. You realize that the battle was never only about what happened to you, it was about what you would believe about yourself afterward. The struggle tried to teach you that you were fragile, replaceable, always one step away from collapse. But the outcome tells a different story. You are still here, not hardened beyond feeling, not emptied beyond recovery, but restored with a wisdom that cannot be taught any other way. Rest in this conclusion is revealed as the ultimate act of trust. It is the moment you stop arguing with the past and stop fearing the future. It is the acceptance that you are not late, not behind, not failing. You are exactly where you are meant to be, carrying exactly what you were meant to carry, no more and no less. The unseen presence that guided you through survival now stands beside you in peace, not as a rescuer rushing in, but as a companion walking with you. You understand now that you were never reaching for safety from a distance. Safety was moving toward you the entire time. The story closes not with an ending that feels abrupt, but with a settling, like dust finally falling after a long storm. You are not standing on the edge of something fragile. You are standing on ground that has proven itself strong enough to hold you. The war that once defined your days no longer writes your identity. What defines you now is continuity, trust, and a rest that does not fade when the world grows loud again. And as this chapter gently comes to rest, the truth remains steady and unshaken. You were carried through what should have broken you. You were preserved beyond your own understanding, and you are now free to live not as someone bracing for impact, but as someone who knows, deeply and without doubt, that they are held, sustained, and finally at peace.